So there's a question already about the slide. Is the slide presentation available? Um, this is a normal webinar as far as technology that I'm familiar with, so I don't know how to make that available now, but we will get it out and have it posted ASAP with on our LCAP page. So to all of you that are listening, we don't have them available now. We apologize, trying to get the FAQs up, and haven't had a lot of time with the executive order to get this posted. We will post it ASAP, and if you need it before that, you can email me and I'll try to get them out to you. There's 515 people online, but we'll get it out ASAP. It's 2 o'clock. I still see numbers rising a little bit. When it stabilizes here in a couple minutes, then we will begin. This is Jeff Brashears again. It's 2:01. People are still filing in, so we'll give them a chance to get into the room. We'll start in a couple minutes. Again, questions about the slide deck. It's not available yet. We will post it ASAP. We appreciate you being here. Okay, this is Jeff Brashears again. Thank you for joining us. We're from the California Department of Education. We're going to have our Tuesday at 2 regarding the LCAP executive order. A couple of points of order and points of business. One is, if you have questions, please use the chat. Do not use Q&A. We are not monitoring the Q&A function, but we are monitoring the chat function. We will stop throughout the presentation to look at and have some dead airspace, if you will, while we're looking at the questions and try to answer those for you. So we'll do that. And again, we will post the slide deck as soon as we can after this webinar. So thank you again so much for joining us, and we will get underway. Maybe. All right. So what are we going to talk about? Just a little bit about the executive order, but you know about that and it has been posted. We'll talk about the 2021 LCAP process. There are some questions that we won't be able to answer, and we'll try to acknowledge that as well. And then when we presented the kind of the high level, both the state and federal a week ago, and then to the webinar last Tuesday, there was a lot of questions about how the executive order affects the school plan for student achievement, and also for the LCAP federal addendum. And we'll just kind of try to talk about that and just work through that. And then we'll just, like I said, throughout the day or throughout this webinar, we will have some questions. So given the uncertainties caused by COVID-19, the impact of California's response had a big impact. And so on the ability to meaningfully engage with stakeholders, to meaningfully develop a plan, executive order N 56-20 was established. Though it was released on April 23rd, it was signed on April 22nd. And so we'll just talk a little bit about the overview of what it did and what it maybe did not do. So it extended the deadline for the 2021 LCAP from on or before July 1 to December 15, 2020. It changed the approval deadline for those review and approval entities, county offices of education, and also CDE for county office LCAPs. It moves that approval deadline to January 14th. And then again, the adoption deadline is the same for charter schools, December 15th, but it aligns the reporting requirements for charter schools to the first interim budget report to its authorizer and the county superintendent of schools. As you can see in this ed code, section 47604.33A3 also moves that to December 15th, 2020. It also aligns the submission and approval deadlines of the budget overview for parents with the new submission deadline for the LCAP. There's a question that has been asked about us is the budget overview for parents going to change to that template? It was not affected by the executive order, and we do not anticipate that to be changed. It also delays the implementation of the 3-year LCAP that the state board adopted in January to the 21-22 through 23-24 school years. And then it also, if you will, it decouples the budget adoption requirement with the LCAP. And so it waives those certain rights. And one is, responsibility and requirements. And that is the adopting of the LCAP prior to the adoption of the 2021 budget. The budget is still due by July 1. And it also decouples the requirement to include LCAP expenditures in the necessary to implement actions within the budget, because we have extended the deadline for the LCAP to December 15th. It also establishes a reporting requirement to provide an overview of the changes, program offerings LEAs are making in response to this outbreak, what the major impacts on students and families, and how the LEA is meeting the needs of its unduplicated students. The reporting will be made through an operations written report and must include the steps LEAs have taken to, again, meet the needs of their unduplicated students, but also deliver high quality distant learning opportunities, provide school meals in a non-congregate setting, and then arrange for supervision of students during normal or ordinary school hours. So the written report, to the extent practicable, that development should be consistent with the stakeholder engagement process that an LEA uses to develop its budget. The written report shall be adopted and approved by the local governing board or body with the LEA's budget, which is due July 1. Now hear this next point. The written report is submitted to the county superintendent of schools or the superintendent of public instruction as applicable, that is the reviewing LCAP reviewing body, with the LEA's budget, but it does not require approval from these entities. So county offices will submit it to their budget to the CDE, and with that will be the operations written report, but it does not require approval beyond the approval of the local board, governing board, or body. When that operations written report is adopted, it must be prominently posted on the homepage of the LEA's website. And the CDE is developing a template for this update written report. We hope to have that out sometime next week. And when it is ready, it'll be posted on our LCAP webpage where the FAQs are now and where our LCAP templates are. And while we are developing this, the written report is required. LEAs are not required to use the template that the CDE is developed. That part, the report is required. The use of the CDE's template for their operations report is not required. So we'll look at, and these are taken from the FAQs that were just recently posted. Those again are found on CDE's LCAP webpage, and just kind of go through those and talk about those as well. So for the 2021 school year, will LEAs be required to use the LCAP template adopted in January 2020? No. The indicates that the template adopted by the state board and that use has been waived, and it'll be used for the 21-22 through the 23-24 school year. And then also you can see our FAQs related to this executive order on our LCAP webpage. What LCAP template stakeholder process will be required for the 2021 LCAP? So there's a lot of questions that are coming in here, and here's really the answer. The template, the metrics, the stakeholder process to be used for the 2021 LCAP is still to be determined and will be detailed in future legislation. Part of the language of the executive order calls the need and acknowledges the need for some legislative guidance. And so CDE will consult with stakeholders, work with the State Board of Education staff and the legislature to develop the 2021 LCAP and that template and the stakeholder process required to develop the LCAP. We've had some question is, do we have to do the same stakeholder process? Do we have to have the same 2 meeting requirements as currently before the pandemic and before the waiver? We don't know. When we don't know what the contents of the 2021 LCAP will be, what the requirements are for those, we are waiting for the legislative template. There's a question, so when this first came out, can we still use the 21-23 LCAP? The answer is no. The executive order waived that and has not, it is not feasible to use the 3-year LCAP for the 2021 LCAP and the LCAP year. We don't know when it will be available. We will work with legislation. There are the process that will be driving the timeline. Will LEAs be required to use the 2019-2020 annual update template that was also adopted in January at the state board meeting? And again, the annual update is still to be determined with future legislation. We do not anticipate the 2019-2020 annual update template to be used because, quite frankly, if you filled it out now, it'd be what was planned, and the actual implementation would almost be just a bunch of cut and paste of COVID-19 or pandemic. So we don't know what that will look like. And again, once we have the legislative guidance, we will work with stakeholders, the legislature, to develop that template, to provide the guidance to develop the LCAP and what that process would look like. The e-template will not be available for the 2021 LCAP. It will be available when we implement the 3-year LCAP template in the 21 through 24 3-year cycle of the LCAP template. Local indicators. Are LEAs required to bring local indicator data to the local governing board in conjunction with the adoption of the 2021 LCAP? No. The executive order waived Ed Code section 52064.5E2, which talks about the public review and adoption of the local indicators in conjunction with the adoption of the LCAP. That aspect has been waived. But please note, as of right now, that the reporting requirements of the dashboard to include local indicator has not been waived. We anticipate some action around the dashboard, but at this point, though the requirement to bring local indicator data before the local governing board or body, that has been waived. The reporting requirements as of now for the dashboard has not been waived. And then you can see also frequently asked questions related to accountability in response to COVID-19 pandemic can be found at this website. So we'll pause there now. We'll just take a couple seconds as Susan is going to look through these questions and see any that we need to answer. And then she'll ask them and we'll try to answer those for you before we move forward.
So there's a question in regards to the local indicators. It says that does the data still need to be collected?
Again, as of now, the local indicator reporting requirements to the dashboard has not been changed. So as of now, that data is still required for the dashboard. We don't know when the LCAP template will be available in the fall because we don't know what the requirements of the template will be because of that. I'm going to read one here. If the district does not use the operation written report template from CDE, does the alternate report have to meet the minimum requirements as stated in the EO? Absolutely, right? I mean, the executive order sets out the foundation to which an LEA must write and report to its local governing board or body the aspect of what needs to be reported. So yes, if you don't use CDE's template, it does not change the requirements of what the LEA must write to.
When will the local indicators for 2019-20 be due now that the July 1 deadline was waived?
Again, the reporting requirements for the dashboard, and I can't address the dashboard when that will be open. Typically, it's opened in mid-August. That reporting requirement hasn't changed. The local indicators do not have to be brought before the local governing board or body. There's a question here about more clarity of local indicators. I don't know how to provide more clarity other than, as of now, the dashboard reporting requirements has not changed. That includes the local indicators. However, the executive order that was signed and published says that the local indicator data does not have to be publicly reported to the and approved by the local governing board or body in conjunction with the adoption of its LCAP. I see a couple questions about school plans. We will get to that and answer those questions if they're not answered by Heather. There's a question about the 2020 dashboard being suspended. As of right now, the 2020 dashboard has not been suspended. I know there's some testing that is suspended, but the reporting requirements of the dashboard has not yet been suspended. Susan, any others that we want to do before we move on?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So now I'll introduce to you Heather Bell. She's part of our LASSO office, and she will discuss some FAQs for both the school plans for student achievement, and then we'll move on to the federal addendum as well. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you, Jeff. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Jeff said, I'm going to talk about the school plan for student achievement a little bit. We've had some questions come in recently. So one of them surrounds the question about, does the executive order N5620 affect the development and approval timeline for the SIPSA? So the short answer for that is no. Executive order N5620 does not affect the SIPSA development and approval timeline. The SIPSA is a one-year plan, so it is intended to be executed for the entire school year. However, technically, statute only says that the SIPSA must be developed and approved annually by the school site council and local governing board. Statute does not designate a specific timeline for when that development and approval must occur. That is a local decision based on what's best for the school and local community. Next slide. There we go. So we've also had some questions come in about whether or not the SIPSA development and approval timeline should align with the new 2021 LCAP development and approval process. So again, to reiterate, statute does not designate a specific timeline for the development and approval of the SIPSA. As long as it's done annually, it is a local decision as to when it is developed and approved. Statute does require the specific actions in the LCAP be consistent with the strategies in the SIPSA. Therefore, an LEA may choose to adjust their SIPSA development and approval timeline to align with the development of its LCAP and the December 15th deadline, but it's not required. Again, statute does not designate a specific timeline for the development and approval of the SIPSA, so it is completely up to what is best for the school and local community. So a lot of questions have been coming in about whether or not Executive Order N5620 affected the flexibility for a single school district or charter school to use the LCAP as its SIPSA to meet federal school planning requirements. And the short answer again is no. EO N5620 does not waive or make changes to any statute that allows a single school district or charter school to use the LCAP to meet federal school planning requirements. So that is still an option that can be decided locally. So again, we've also had some questions come in kind of asking for guidance about should the single school district or charter school develop a SIPSA separately instead of incorporating the federal school planning requirements into the LCAP. So basically having a SIPSA and an LCAP. So just to clarify, the template an LEA uses to meet federal school planning requirements is a local decision. There is no legally required template for federal school plans. So traditionally, an approved 3-year LCAP meets federal school planning requirements with the inclusion of Title I expenditures. However, because of this uncertain time and until legislative guidance is provided to develop the 2020-21 LCAP template, it is not known if it will meet all federal school planning requirements. So as usual, it is the responsibility of the LEA to ensure that all federal school planning requirements are met, regardless of the template the LEA chooses to use. So again, we've also had questions about stakeholder engagement, especially under shelter in place. And so stakeholder engagement, EO N5620 does provide some guidance related to how schools can continue to engage stakeholder groups centered around the SIPSA, like the School Site Council and the English Learner Advisory Committee during shelter in place. And so luckily, EO N5620 and EO N2920 provide guidance regarding holding public meetings virtually. So I want to reiterate, though, that again, statute does not specify a timeline for SIPSA development and approval by the School Site Council and local governing board. LEAs may proceed with stakeholder engagement under shelter in place. That is completely an option, absolutely, but it is recommended that they do so consistent with the requirements specified in both executive orders. Executive Order N2920 gives a really detailed breakdown of how LEAs can engage stakeholders under shelter in place. So I suggest looking directly at that EO. But again, this is a local decision. It's based on what is best for the school and local community in terms of how they engage their stakeholders at this time. So I'm going to pause for some questions in case anybody has something that I didn't get a chance to cover. So Susan will read some of them to me and Jeff and I will answer them for you as best as we can.
So there's a couple questions about timeline, and Heather answered those timeline questions, but just want to reiterate, especially about schools that are in CSI. Lori Marshall and her office are working on CSI FAQs, and with some of the waivers from the ED, we intend to try to align those planning requirements with this executive order as well. And again, the question about single schools and charters, can they use their LCAP typically, like Heather said, an approvable LCAP now meets school-wide program requirements if you have the addition have the inclusion of Title I funds within that LCAP. We don't know what the new LCAP will look like. We don't know to what extent an approvable LCAP will meet these federal school planning requirements. And certainly timeline, you can wait for the template and incorporate a single school and charter school can incorporate and use the LCAP. It just may take more than what's required in the LCAP to meet those planning requirements. And as we know what's required in the LCAP, we will certainly provide that guidance to say what needs to be in the LCAP to service the SIPSA as well. And again, there's some questions about timeline. To reiterate, there is no statutory deadline to adopt a SIPSA. It can wait to the fall, and it is not necessarily tied to the adoption of the plan to start spending those monies, especially if you go in the fall. But certainly, you would anticipate what that would look like. I want to back up before we move forward a little bit and talk about the written report and the budget approval. The budget approval is one meeting. There used to be 2 meetings required for the LCAP to review the LCAP and then the next meeting to adopt both the LCAP and the budget. That is not required because the LCAP is there, and we do not anticipate a public hearing requirement for the operations written report, but it would be adopted with the budget. There's been a question about, is it intended to be a consent item? It really is not. I mean, it does not specify that it can't be, but if the encouragement is to develop it with as much stakeholder engagement as practicable, certainly then the intent and the hope would be that an LEA would have that discussion with its public as they discuss what they have done in response to the pandemic and how they're meeting the needs of the students. And I think to put it onto a consent item defeats the purpose of the requirement for this written report. We're just perusing the questions before we move on.
I did
we
see
will,
one. Sorry, Jeff.
Go ahead, please.
That someone was asking for a template that meets the SIPSA guidelines. So again, like I said, there is no required template. However, CDE does provide a SIPSA template for the LEA's convenience that can be found on the LCAP page. So again, the template doesn't meet requirements. It's what's in the template, right? So though the template outlines different prompts and things like that, the information that is put into the template is what would meet requirements. So just keep that in mind, but there is a template available for LEA's use if they would like.
Jeff, there are multiple questions in regards to having the 2020-23 LCAP template that was adopted in January used as an option to complete their LCAP because many many LEAs have already put in a lot of work into it. And would you be able to elaborate on that?
Okay, so a couple things. One, any LCAP that was developed prior to the pandemic, it realistically is not going to be an accurate LCAP. My understanding is the interpretation of the executive order is that it waived that 3-year template until next spring. And so it's not an option to use. And even if an LCAP, if one wanted to pursue that, the approval timeline has been extended until January 14th. And so a reviewing and approving body has until January 14th to review and approve that submitted LCAP. But again, I would say that any LCAP that was developed prior to the pandemic, without knowing the budget, without having, with the fiscal uncertainty of the state, would not be an accurate LCAP and by all practical purposes need to be revised in the fall when the budget is there as well. So as I understand it, and as we are stating in the FAQs, which has been vetted internally, is that the 3-year LCAP is in next spring, the 21 through 24 template years, and the 2021 LCAP is going to be yet to be developed based on legislative guidance. And there's some pushback about having 2 LCAPs in such a short period. I don't disagree with that, but that is the executive order, and that's the anticipation of the legislative guidance for the 2021 LCAP. There's another question about spending money for SIPSAs. There is not a requirement in statute that says you have to have an approved SIPSA before you start spending monies at the school level to support your students. And so it is okay to postpone, as Heather said, to adopt the school plans in the fall and even in alignment with the LCAP. There's a question about paying staff out of supplemental funds. And there is also a question, there's an interesting question about where are these questions coming from? Don't see them in chat. As soon as the the executive order came out, some of our emails just got inboxes, became all of a sudden very active again, more active than normal and usual. But a couple of questions in here that I want to talk about. It says, can we pay staff out of supplemental funds? Supplemental funds are not a categorical. They're not a category. They are they're general funds. And so you still have the responsibility of meeting your MPP, but it's not a spending requirement. It's a meeting to increase or improve services requirement. So if you staff moving forward in how you do it, it's not a spending requirement to use supplemental funds as a categorical fund.
Jeff,
somebody asked me to respond to Lisa's question. I don't see it. So if somebody would respond, or Lisa, if you'd resubmit your question, we can look to answer it.
Sorry, there's one question that is, are LEAs still required to submit LEA created SIPSA templates to CDE for approval to use to create their SIPSAs? So the answer to that is no. The SIPSA template that an LEA chooses to use, the only criteria, the only requirements are that the information in it meets federal school planning requirements. There's no longer a need for LEAs to submit a SIPSA template that they're choosing to use to CDE for approval. It's just if the LEA is in an FPM review or something, then they would submit their SIPSA. But other than that, there's no requirement that CDE approves a SIPSA template created by an LEA.
Okay, moving on.
Okay, so I'm up again. This is Heather still. I'm going to talk a little bit about the LCAP federal addendum. We had a couple questions come in about the federal addendum requirements and the executive order N5620. So to answer, EO N5620, does it affect the LCAP federal addendum requirements? Again, short answer is no. The LCAP federal addendum requirements are not addressed in EO N5620, therefore they remain unchanged. But a big clarification point for the field, the LCAP federal addendum needs to be completed and submitted for approval by the CDE and the state board once. So LEAs that are applying for ESSA funding for the first time in 2020, 2021 are required to complete and submit LCAP federal addendums for CDE and SBE approval in the 2020-2021 school year. LEAs that submitted federal addendums to CDE for CDE and state board approval in 2019-20 do not need to submit a new federal addendum for 2020-2021. Just want to make sure that's clear.
I'm working on it.
No worries. Perfect. Okay, and so then the second piece to that is, does the EO address any changes to the process for the federal addendum submission? So no, the LCAP federal addendum requirements, again, are not addressed in the EO. And LEAs, again, who are applying for ESSA funding for the first time in 2020-2021 will complete and submit federal addendums to CDE for CDE and state board approval in the federal addendum system. That system has not changed, same process. Revisions or adjustments to approved federal addendums can be done at the local level, may be done at the local level. Any revision made at the local level must be consistent with specific title requirements and do not need to be submitted within the LCAP federal addendum system. So again, there can be revisions and adjustments made to already approved federal addendums, but they don't need to be submitted to the federal addendum system. That would be done on a local level. So for further guidance related to the LCAP federal addendum, there's a website at the bottom of this slide that you can go to. It's on the CDE webpage. If you just type in LCAP federal addendum to the search, you'll be able to find it as well. So that can answer some of your additional questions and also provides you with contact information for all 4 of the titles in case you have any specific questions pertaining to each title.
Heather, there's a question in regards to the deadline for the 2020-21 LCAP addendum.
Oh, for the upcoming one?
No, for 2020-21. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
So if there's specific, I'm going to answer that. If there's specific questions about deadlines that anybody that's wanted funding for 2021, they should have already submitted within CARS to understand that. We are going to bring the federal addendums to the state board either in July or September, depending on July looks like to be a pretty impacted state board meeting. And so we're trying to get to yes as soon as possible. If you have specific questions or concerns, contact LCFF. We can guide you through those deadlines. And it feels a bit fluid right now, other than it's past, as I understand it, the deadline to apply for funds through the CONAP, but getting to yes is fluid, and just we need to work as diligently as possible, both CDE and the LEAs, to get to yes. There's still some questions about the local indicators. Oh no, mine went back up to the top. My apologies.
So I see a couple questions about the addendum. So for clarification, this is a great question. If an LEA is applying for an ESSA program that they didn't previously apply for, do they still need to submit that section for approval? So for example, if an LEA is applying for Title II for 2020-2021, but they did not apply for Title II in 1920, therefore they did not do a Title II addendum, they would need to do a Title II addendum for 2020-2021. So anytime an LEA is applying for ESSA funding for the first time, regardless of title, they need to do a federal addendum section for that title. And then another one was great. If we make any changes to our addendum, do we just locally keep it handy in the same template form? It's completely up to LEAs how they would like to document changes. Whatever is convenient for LEAs, whatever works best is perfectly fine.
There's been a couple questions about school student supervision during school hours. I don't have that information with me in the LASSO office. I know it was tied to a previous executive order, I want to say 25 or 26, but I wouldn't bet golf money on that. And so we will, if one, you could feel free to email us at LCFF and we will direct you accordingly to where that, how we can best answer those questions. And I apologize, I don't have a better answer than that. It was N26. Thanks, Ellen.
There's a question about where you can find language about virtual stakeholder meetings. So again, Executive Order N29-20, page 2, paragraph 3 goes through all of the things that have been the pieces of both the Bagley-Keene and Brown Act that have been suspended under COVID-19, under the state of emergency, and allowing public stakeholder meetings to take place virtually. EON 5620 added in the Green Act, which includes school site council. So all of those stakeholder meetings may now be done virtually.
Did my screen just go away?
It's showing your Teams chat.
Sorry about that. We're perusing the questions again. I don't know how to further address clarity on the local indicators. You may have to report them in the dashboard in the fall, but we do anticipate some action and some flexibility with the dashboard. As of now, that the dashboard reporting requirements lays in place. You do not have to bring local indicator data before the local governing board or body for approval in conjunction with the, at all, or in conjunction with the LCAP.
There's a question in regards to the links on this PowerPoint. This PowerPoint will be posted on the LCAP page this week. So please go to that the LCAP page by the end of this week, and it should be there.
To go back, then people are asking about the template for the operations written report. It is under development, and we hope to have that posted next week.
There are many questions in regards to the operations report. Will that have to be, will that need stakeholder input before board approval?
To the extent practicable, that's addressed in the FAQs that are posted on the LCAP webpage. To the extent practicable, as an LEA would develop its local budget, it does not require a separate hearing prior to budget approval. And again, I apologize. I know there's questions about student supervision, and had I anticipated that question, I apologize. We would have hopefully had an answer, a better answer than other than we're not sure at this point. I don't have the information before me. And for that, I apologize. Again, another question about using supplemental funds until the LCAP is adopted. Again, supplemental funds are not a categorical fund. They're unrestricted funds. It's not a spending requirement. It's a requirement to meet the needs of the unduplicated students. So as you're moving forward, you certainly may move forward in that same way.
There's a question that says, if we have approved federal addendums, we just need to reflect any adjustments in the plan. Can those revised addendums be completed with the same timeline as the 2021 LCAP? And that is a local decision in terms of when the federal addendum adjustments would be made.
There's not a requirement to revise your federal addendum with your LCAP. There's a request to include student supervision question as part of our FAQs. Yes, we will update our FAQs and probably as soon as we can, because we'll incorporate these SIPSA questions and the federal addendum into our FAQs. And so we will look to and include student supervision within those FAQs, and at least be able to report you to the right place for further information. There's a question about adhering LEAs needing to adhere to the Brown Act or the Green Act. The Green Act is what covers, we had changed the ed code fairly early on under LCFF to specify that school site councils, the parent advisory councils, and the English learner parent advisory councils, which are required part of LCFF, they are covered under Green Act and not the Brown Act. And with that, Heather, say again, is it N29 for the virtual meetings?
Yes, N29. Okay.
So what our N56 did was referred back for these committees that are affected by the Green Act, if you will, tied them into the previous executive order, which allows some flexibility of open meetings and to be able to do so virtually. There's some more questions about the about the local indicators. I don't know how to better answer other than when if it still reports to the board, there's going to be a way to indicate met even though you don't have to bring the local indicators before the board. And I know the local indicators, because it's two different requirements, one before the board as is tied to the LCAP, and the other as far as reporting requirements for the dashboard is confusing and probably frustrating, and I can appreciate that. But now, as it stands now, like I said, the dashboard requirements has not been waived, and we anticipate some movement with that, but until that time, and that's there. And so if it doesn't move, we will provide further guidances like how to answer and how to report within the dashboard. But I can't answer a question any better than I have at this point. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we truly appreciate your time. I'm going to take a couple more minutes to look at questions if they're there, and then we'll sign off. Question about, do we anticipate legislature to address the dashboard? I can't anticipate what the legislature will or will not do. Again, the annual update, the 1920 annual update will be a part of the 2021 LCAP, which is going to be designed and not designed by, but defined by legislative guidance. We don't know what that looks like yet. We do not anticipate using the 1920 annual update template that was adopted in January. It's almost moot at this point. And so the annual update and the 2021 LCAP will be developed based on legislative guidance. And with that, there's a timeline of when we think that the LCAP will be ready for the 2021. I don't know how quickly the legislature will act, but as soon as it is, we will act to put it together and get it out to the field as soon as we can, and provide that guidance and support as best we can as you develop that during these trying times. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I really would like to thank you again for your time, for your patience, for your questions, and We will bid you adieu and post these as soon as we can, and hope you have a great afternoon. Thank you.